felt like traditional core values were just kind of fake and flat. And frankly, a lot of companies, even like Enron's a great example, where they had these really well-known core values that they posted right on their front doorway. Literally, they were like, when you walked into Enron, you would all see their core values. And they're like the most unethical company in history. And so I kind of felt like I wanted to do something different. I felt like, hey, let's not, and also I felt like we're kind of entering this era where maybe I'm a little bit more of a libertarian, where it's like, I don't really want to tell people what their values need to be.
Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you on Fearless Founders. I have been waiting for this guest for a long time. We're excited to have Jeron Paul here, an old friend of mine, and it's been over a decade plus, maybe 2 decades. I don't know. It's a scary thing to think about.
Wow, that's scary. Getting up there.
It's getting there, except he still looks like a fresh teenager. So with that said, Jeron, we're so glad to have you. Ike and I have been talking about you. And if I did my research correctly, you may have had 4, not just 3 companies that you started and were able to exit, from a board link, now Reuters has that, to Scalar as a management buyout, to Cap Share that Morgan Stanley is now the owner of, and the latest, just 4.5 plus months, although it took years, Spiff being sold to Salesforce.com. Congrats, bud. That is amazing. Who gets to do that? Wow. It's just so excited. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Wow, it's super kind of you.
Hey, because we don't have much time, we just want to dig in and figure some things out. How does this mind of yours work to even start the business and then ultimately craft a way in which you get a successful exit? So I have to ask the most basic question. Do you already look for an exit before you start the business? Or do you start the business because you love the problem it's solving and hope it meanders to an exit? How does that work in Jeron's mind?
Yeah, so when I first started being kind of an entrepreneur and thinking that I wanted to go down that path, I think there was a little bit less method to the madness back then, and I kind of just started businesses that I thought, kind of met a need, and I didn't think about how big they were. And in fact, at that time, I often thought more about. I was okay with starting small businesses that might even be like a lifestyle business. Do you know what I mean? But as I sold a couple of businesses and then had some really positive financial outcomes, then I started to be more methodical about it. So somewhere around my second exit or third exit, I really started to kind of have a little bit more of a framework. And I used this thing. I used roughly this thing I call. Well, actually, I learned it when I was in venture capital, called the 5 M's, and it stands for like market, management, the money, which is like the deal or how you're going to finance something, the business model, and then the product. And I can't remember if I had some M for the product, but basically it was the product. So I looked at those kind of 5 things, and then I assess the opportunity based on how strong those 5 M's are.
Wow, I'll remember those 5 M's. That's a good one. That's a great model that everyone listening in can learn from. And when you started on this journey, was that because your family had a background in being small business owners or entrepreneurs? How did the bug hit you in the first place?
Yeah, I think the bug hit me because I started my career. I really graduated from, so this will date me, but I graduated from undergrad in the middle of the dot-com boom. And I was, in fact, it was kind of right as all the dot-coms were imploding. And I remember feeling like it was actually so fun to be a part of that actually. And even though there was a lot of hype and there were a lot of dumb companies, like pets.com, and Webvan, which now actually seems kind of smart. This was like a grocery delivery business 1.0 that failed. But I remember just thinking, wow, the world's really changing. Back then, it wasn't obvious that technology companies were all, that technology was the kind of primary driver of our economy. It was exciting and new to see how much of a driver it could become, and it went kind of crazy, and then people kind of came back to earth and said, well, we've really overinvested in this space, and we need to get back to basics, and non-tech companies are better, and there's this kind of a retraction of this really optimistic, maybe rose-colored glasses period in our economy. But I actually kind of hungered to go back to those heady, .com days, and so I kind of felt like, even though I could see that there was going to be a bit of a dip, I felt like the future was still going to be investing
Yeah.
heavily in technology businesses, and so I think because of that, I really shifted my mindset to, hey, I either want to be in venture capital or I want to be building my own technology businesses. I felt like that was the future. And so I really worked hard to qualify myself for those two different career paths. And that's really how I got into it. I worked as a consultant for a company in Boston right out of undergraduate. And then after that, that was kind of right when the .com stuff was blowing up. I kind of said, hey, I wanted to see if I can get a job in venture capital, and venture capital jobs were so hard to come by, but I had managed somehow to get into Harvard Business School in that period to get admitted to it, but I wasn't going to start for another several months, and so I begged, borrowed, and basically stole my way into a venture capital company here locally in Utah. I'm actually based out of Utah. Called It's now called Signal Peak Ventures, and I actually cashed in my 401k because they weren't going to give me a salary, and so I just paid for my own way for a summer,
Mhm.
and that really cemented my love of technology businesses. And I think that's ever after that, I was like, hey, I'm either going to go into venture capital or software, and my whole career has been focused on kind of those two opportunities, and really more and more software and less venture capital. But ever since then, so
That's
hopefully
when
I
we ran
answered
into.
the question.
Yeah,
Sorry for the
it
long-winded
did. No, it's
answer there.
fantastic. That's how we ran into each other when you were at Signal Peak.
That's
That was the
right.
first time I ran into you
That's right. I
a
remember that.
long time ago, and that you have clearly graduated way beyond that now. And so uh, I know that Ike's got a question because
It's
I
okay.
know you. I know your personality here, Jaron. So when it comes to building these businesses and going through that sequence for first-time founders, what are the two things you'd say to them right now? Before you do that, think of this and this. What were the two things you tell them? I want to get all the juicy nuggets out of you early on because we're going to run out of time. Yeah. What would you say, tell them, having done this now multiple times?
Having done it multiple times, what would I tell them? That is a really good question. I think there's this famous quote from Goethe that I used to have framed actually on my I used to kind of keep it above my desk at all times when I was whenever I was thinking about starting a company. And maybe I could just read that. Do you mind if I read it?
Please.
It's like a paragraph, so bear with me here. It says, concerning all acts of initiative in creation, there is one elemental truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. And then it says colon. So this is the one elemental truth, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that otherwise would never have occurred. All streams of events issue from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings, and material assistance which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic. And so I
Mm.
love that boldness has genius, power, and magic. So I think it's be bold. I think it's if you have an idea, just do it and let the chips fall. You probably will fail a couple of times before you succeed, and that's par for the course. In fact, that most entrepreneurs I think have to fail a couple of times or have a couple of
Mhm.
moderate to okay outcomes before they get some huge exit. And so I think that's the main piece of advice I would give.
Wow, that's fantastic. And when you first went from being in the VC world to actually starting your business, did you just say, "Well, I'm just going to do this on my own," or did you get friends and family money in? How did you start that very first one out of
Yeah,
being a
yeah. So that's the there's this constant chicken and egg problem that all first time entrepreneurs have, which is you're not a proven bet, so it's going to be very difficult for you to go raise a significant amount of venture capital. And a lot of times you're thinking, hey, if I just could get a little bit of money, then I could do this, and if I could do this, then I'll get more money, and I could start this flywheel. And really, in a lot of ways, a lot of people even define entrepreneurship as the the pursuit of creating a business without the necessary resources to build the business. So it's like literally, it's like that's almost the definition of entrepreneurship, which is like, hey, I know I want to build something, but I don't have the resources currently that I need to go build it. And so a lot of times people will say, they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, I really think I should be an entrepreneur. I want to do it. I'm so got this amazing idea, but I just can't because I don't have the cash or blah blah blah. And I think the first response to that should be like, well, that is the very act of entrepreneurship. It's doing things when you don't have the resources. So if you can't find a way to get started at all, you're probably not going to be a great entrepreneur because you're going to have that problem's not going to go away. I mean, it actually kind of just gets, in many ways, it just gets, yeah, it gets easier, but it doesn't go away for many, many years. And so in the first one I started honestly was almost entirely bootstrapped. So I I had this weird idea that venture capital, I wanted to get into venture capital and I wasn't finding any job opportunities. And so I had this weird idea though that like a lot of the folks that invest in venture capital firms, they might want to know what entrepreneurs think about those venture capital firms. So I set out with this idea of like I'd like to create the world's largest survey of entrepreneurs and get like the entrepreneur's rating of venture capital firms. And so I stayed up nights and weekends and I was scraped the web for email addresses. And back then, email addresses could be inferred and there was a lot less security around email addresses. And so a lot of times you could send an email to an address and if it didn't bounce back or if you got a response, you kind of knew it worked. And so I ended up pulling together 80,000 email addresses. So it was a ton of work. Um, and then we sent out this like email survey and we got back a bunch of responses and we ranked venture capital firms. And guess what? Total failure. Like no limited partners wanted that data. They were just like, okay, cool. Some guy, pulled together a bunch of like, looks like semi-statistically accurate data, and we already know who the great venture capital firms are. So for a while, I kind of shelved that and just thought, oh, maybe that's not going anywhere. But on the side, I was constantly looking for other startups to do. And while I was interning at Signal Peak Ventures, or at the time it was called V Spring Capital, while I was interning at this venture capital firm, I met another individual from Bain. He had been a Bain and Company consultant. And we got talking, and he kind of had this idea that like there's this big movement at that time where the government was requiring companies to startups actually to get a valuation of their stock when they wanted to grant stock. This was in the wake of like the Enron scandal, and there's all these companies that were giving away stock, and they were potentially giving it away. They were kind of marking it at a. They were kind of using it a little bit to avoid taxes by maybe marking the value of that stock artificially low. So the government said, "Hey, we want to stop that. So if you're going to start a startup, you got to go get what's called a 409A valuation." And he and I started talking that back and forth, batting it back and forth, and we said, yeah, that's a good idea. You could start a business around that, you know. And he had kind of gotten a 409A valuation for one of the companies he was working with, and he got one of the reports that an investment bank had pulled together. And he had like looked at it and kind of reverse engineered it and kind of built out his own model. This guy was brilliant. His name was Ildar Fazilonov. I'm pronouncing it wrong, but can't believe I can't pronounce his last name right now. But good friend. And he kind of said, well, and I said, well, hey, look, in a previous life, I pulled together 80,000 email addresses. I stayed up till 2 a.m. typing these stupid things in. And I said, I have 80,000 email addresses of entrepreneurs, like CEOs of startups. I said, why don't we just email them and see if they want a 409A valuation? And he said, okay. And we did. And we like within like 2 hours, we got like three people back saying like, yeah, like sign me up. How do we do this? And then over the period of the next couple of weeks, we probably closed $20,000 or $30,000 worth of business. And so it was just like that fast. And it's a long story what happened with Ildar, because he ended up not wanting to go into business with me at that time full time. But he said, yeah, sure, take the idea. So we took the idea and ran with it. And that created Scalar, that company I had mentioned to you. And we did raise a little bit of friends and family around that business just so we could scale it up. We raised, I want to say, like $17,000 or something. Jeremy Andrus, the CEO of Traeger, was an investor. And yeah, we raised a little bit of money and we were off to the races and built a really, really cool services business out of that idea. It wasn't a software business at that time, but it was profitable and generated a lot of cash flow. And that gave me some money then to go start other businesses.
Wow,
So
look at
yeah, that's
that.
kind of
That's
the
great.
story of the first one.
Those are the stories we want to hear. That's fantastic. And I do know Ildar, another friend from the past. So it's kind of an interesting story. I know you're dying to ask this question of him. You told me you wanted, because
So
I have
um, it let me give some perspective to the audience because it has different elements to it. The three elements. One is when you and I saw each other, I'll say, in an investor meeting. This is at least like 6 years ago, maybe even more. Um, you you had an interesting stance on the core values and the KPIs that you give to your people, your team. It was like you were staying away from conventional core values. Like that left an impression on me when I first met you. Then the second aspect of it, over the years, like LinkedIn just pop up things, and I saw you thanking for the employees that were leaving Spiff for their service. I've seen that consistently. You've done that a lot. And the last bit is, I don't want to say the exact numbers. You can say that, but I think the Spiff was sold. There was a post that you did. This many employees became millionaires and all that. So that you obviously made a lot of your team members successful, happy, so they can do whatever they want to do next as well. So tell us those ideologies you have, how you consider the team members, and then how you guide them, but what their contribution should be to the company. And maybe lastly, right, how would a founder should think, how should a founder think about rewarding those employees that actually contributed? Do you know, like it's maybe multifaceted a little bit, but I think it's all connected. That's why I'm asking this long question.
Sorry, I love that question so much. I thank you so much. And wow, it's super gratifying that someone is actually listening, like that it isn't just my mom that's replying to my LinkedIn posts. And so thank you very much, and thank you for caring enough about our culture to notice that. Yeah, I went on this really big kick for a while where I felt like traditional core values were just kind of fake and flat. And frankly, a lot of companies, even like Enron's a great example, where they had these really well known core values that they posted right on their front doorway. Literally, they were like when you walked into Enron, you would all see their core values. And they're like the most unethical company in history. And
Hmm.
so I kind of felt like I wanted to do something different. I felt like, hey, let's not, and also I felt like we're kind of entering this era where maybe I'm a little bit more of a libertarian, where it's like, I don't really want to tell people what their values need to be. I kind of want people to be able to bring their values to the company and have them be their values. And they, as long, and then I said, but oh, that might be weird. What if their values really clash with each other? And what I found is, for the most part, that's really overstated. That's just not true, actually. It really, so we ended up kind of developing for the first 4 years of Spiff, 3.5, 4 years of Spiff. We didn't really have core values. We had something called a definition of victory, and then we had a leadership mandate. We had those two things.
Hmm.
And the definition of victory is, hey, this is what we're trying to go build as a company. And we tried to get really, really clear with everybody around this is our goal. And we would invite them into these all hands meetings where we talk about, like, here's what we're going to do in Act One, here's what we're going to do in Act Two, here's what we're going to do in Act Three. And we would let them in on our strategy. And we'd say, hey, everybody, this is under NDA. Or, we didn't actually have them sign NDAs, but we're like, hey, this is really critical to our success. You can't share this. If you go and work for a competitor, that's your choice, but you can't share this. And we would let them in on our definition of victory and our strategy. And then we just said, hey, we hire leaders here, and we hire the people that want to lead and show us how to achieve that even better than we've done before. And so that's kind of how was our approach to culture for many years. We Around year four, we got started getting a lot of pushback. We said, hey, this is great, but I don't know what to do if I want to be promoted or if I need to let someone go. And so there became this little bit of tension where it's like, hey, this is a little too nebulous, because clearly you have something in your mind, Jeron, when you're promoting person X over person Y. Why did you do that? And I'd love a little more detail. So we ended up kind of doing something. We kind of felt like we met in the middle, and we created something that we call Spiff patterns. And so they're not rules or laws or core values that can never
Hmm.
change. What we felt like is that they're patterns that we've noticed that help us to achieve that definition of victory. And they're subject to change. We literally like asterisk them, and we say like, hey, these aren't necessarily set in stone. They're just the patterns that we've seen that help us to help our customers the most. And then we like basically disseminated those patterns into the group, into the team, and they became, I think, important. And I think that helped us to attract, honestly, uh, like most cultures do. Cultures have a job to do. There's a job to be done by culture, and one of the jobs to be done is to help you attract people that are going to help you
Hmm.
and get
Yeah.
passionate about the job you're trying to do for your customers. That's actually the main purpose of culture. And in fact, I don't know if I can share my screen here. Maybe I can actually.
I
Um,
think you can.
do you care if I could share my screen
No,
really
no,
quick?
go for it.
Okay, so I'll share this really quick. So like a lot of people think that this right here, I don't know if you can see this. Let me go to
I don't.
slideshow.
I'm
Yeah,
trying
a lot
to.
of oh, can you see it?
No, we cannot. Try one more time.
Okay, let me try one more time. Stop screen sharing, present, share screen. It's easiest with two monitors. Some screens let you share on. Well, I don't have two monitors, so let me see. It says I can do it. Maybe I'll just try my entire screen here. Let me just see if this might go weird here for a
Ah,
second. But
here it is.
can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, there we
Here,
go. We got. So can you see this now? It
yeah.
should look like
Yes.
a.
Hmm.
Okay, so a lot of people think about culture as, hey, culture influences the people you hire, and then the people you hire in turn help to define and build and influence the culture. And there's this really wonderful virtuous cycle. And that's really true. But at Spiff, we tended to think about it more like this, which is, yep, people influence culture, but also, and perhaps even most importantly, our customer problems influence our culture. So we exist to solve a problem for customers. That's why they pay us. and
Mhm.
and so we started getting really, really clear about, hey, what's the problem we're solving for customers? And then we actually built our culture around being really, really good at solving those problems. Now, for Spiff, that meant that we were, and let's see if I can stop sharing. So for at Spiff, that meant we were really, really laser focused on, you know, trying to solve kind of really intellectually thorny problems around commissions and sales motivation techniques. And so I think that was the main. We really found a way to start hiring for people that kind of met that or fit that bill. So anyway, like I'll stop on that and just say on your other two questions, I don't know what I've done in my life to be able to be surrounded by such incredible people, both starting with my co-founder who started the last two companies with me, Matt Stapleton, and so all going all the way back to Scalar.
Mhm.
Um, but once you get amazing people around you, there's just it creates this magnetic attraction, right, where they attract other amazing people, and yeah, so I would chalk it up to the reason why I'm saying great things about our people on LinkedIn is because, to be honest, they are absolutely astounding people. We would not have gotten to the exit without them, and I'm thrilled to be able to, um, tell the world about them. There's one. I'll just share one quick anecdote. There's a woman that we hired named Jessica Shisato. She's a engineer, and for a long time we thought long and hard about, like, hey, we have a one of our key things we do that's really cool. We kind of took the employee of the month concept and like blew it out. We basically have something we call Spiff Legends, and these are
Mhm.
people that we nominate, two of them every year, and we announce them at the big company annual event, and we give them a big equity grant, and we also we create a named holiday in their honor, which reoccurs every single year. And so we have a Jessica Day, for example, is a thing. It's if you ask people about Jessica Day, they'll know what you're talking about. It's she
Mhm.
gets to pick a day in the year that we all get to take off. It's like a federal holiday, and but it's named after her. And so for a long time, we wanted to nominate Jessica, and Jessica is so good. And when we nominate people, we always post about them on LinkedIn when they're selected as a legend. And honestly, there was like this brief period where I was like, I don't want to post about Jessica on LinkedIn. She's too good. Like someone is going to come try to poach her, and
Mhm.
they're gonna see that this is like our secret weapon. I mean, she's this incredible engineer, and that lasted for all about 30 seconds until I realized it's just super inconsistent with our culture and who we are. And we're like, yeah, if she gets poached, I mean, that's we believe in karma so strongly, and then that's the right thing. She's done such amazing stuff for us. The least we can do is to promote her, and if someone comes and takes her, then and they pay her a lot more money, she's probably worth it, to be honest. And now we did raise her salary, and we gave her equity, and we did everything to make it really hard for her to go. But yeah. So anyway, thanks, Ike, for the question. I hope that was a rambling response,
Yeah, yeah,
but
no, it's great.
yeah.
It was great. Like two things, just to double click on two areas. One is when you made that change, like 4 years into it, I think you said, is it because in the early days it's all about hiring the people that can do many things at the same time, and then you start to specialize and you start hiring specialists and instead creating career paths for the younger generation. So like sometimes people say 100 people, but it's probably not about the exact number. It's about when you switch from the generalist to specialist. Is that when that happened?
Yeah, I think that is probably around when that happened. You're right. It does seem like it's around 100 people, but I agree. It's probably not the number that's magic. It's when you start
Yeah.
hiring specialists. Yes, I think
Yeah,
that's a really
yeah.
great
And
insight.
can you also help our founders with the equity piece for the employees? Like you how should they think about it? And you know, eh, I've seen cases where if the company is growing, and there's an exit at the end of the tunnel, right? And everybody wins. But um, the if the growth is not there and the acquirers are not there, and the growth is stagnant, then that equity piece starts to hurt a little bit, and then people are, I'm just gonna go find somewhere else that's gonna give me, even though this
Salary.
is more icing on the cake, because salaries, what you, I think, give in return for the heart and soul and sweat they bring in. How do you can you help our founders a little bit? Like how is the best way to think about this, and how much space to create for the equity pieces for the employees?
Yeah, totally. So and this leads to your other question, sorry, that I didn't ever answer, which is like, we published statistics after we sold Spiff about how many millionaires we created, and yeah, we do track that. So like, I've I've thought a lot about what I want my life to be about, and I'm still not sure what I want to be when I grow up in a lot of ways, and I'm old now, but because like there comes a point where you realize, man, I hope I can leave something of lasting good on this planet, that goes beyond
Hmm.
just creating wealth for myself, or for my family. I mean, and so one of the things though that I've kind of learned is that, there that I can hold my head high if I create a great company and a great culture, and that we provide a great living for a lot of people, and that we help them to achieve their financial goals, and that we make some other folks wealthy enough that they can go and start other companies and do that for other people, and that they can give to the charities of their choosing. Um, so I guess a couple things that we did at Spiff along the lines that you're discussing around equity and salary, and just retaining great talent in general. So when we started Spiff, we knew literally from day one that we wanted to have something called, we didn't know the brand name. We ended up branding it Spiff Up, and it's basically, we partnered with the Utah Community Foundation, which is awesome, and they specialize in creating donor advised funds. And so we contributed 1% of all of our revenue to a donor advised fund called Spiff Up. And
Hmm.
every year we would take 1% of our revenue, and we would decide as a team how we wanted to go spend that money to have an impact. And I was lucky enough to have one of my co-founders, Albert Kandari, who's already extremely kind of charity minded. He's just an incredible individual. If you ever get to meet him, he's literally one in a million. But he took over Spiff Up and ran Spiff Up, and he really created an insane culture there of giving back, where we would also do matching campaigns. So Spiff Up would either find other corporate partners that would go in with us, or we would partner with the Community Foundation of Utah, and we would say, hey, if we'll give some money from Spiff Up if you match it, the money that we're giving from Spiff Up, which already came from our revenues, but if they contribute, so if employees contributed to it, then we would find other partners that would match it again, or sometimes we would match it again, and we ended up doing incredible things. We funded like 17 kids in Madagascar for an entire year for all their school expenses and fees. We contributed to the Chameleon Project, which is for the victims of childhood sexual abuse overseas. We uh, made a sizable contribution to Ukraine, to folks who were displaced.
Hmm.
So we ended up doing some awesome things that way. On your salary and equity question now, more specifically, with Jessica, who I mentioned earlier, we couldn't immediately we when we hired her, we knew she was going to be good, but we didn't know how good she was going to be. She was really, really good. And so once we kind of that clicked in our minds, we said, "Wow." We hired her, and I'm just going to pick an arbitrary number. Let's say she was making X, let's say $100. I'm just going to pick some random number. It was much, much higher than that. But let's say she's making $100, and we realized, oh my gosh, she's worth $200. We're a startup. So how do we retain her now, recognizing that she's actually worth $200, but we don't feel like we have a budget for that? So you can do some in equity, as you mentioned, but a lot of people will discount that. One of the things we did though
Hmm.
is we would go to her and we'd say, "Hey, Jessica, here," we would proactively give her a raise. So we would say, "Okay, we can't get her to 200 yet, but let's get her from 100 to 120 this quarter." So we'd go to her and we wouldn't ask her, we wouldn't interview her, we wouldn't make her go through a process. We'd just immediately, we'd literally call her and we'd say, "Hey, Jessica, we love you so much. We're raising you right now. Your next paycheck." Like we do it on a Friday and the paycheck's on Monday. We'd be like, "On Monday, you're getting a 20% raise." And that does a lot for people. They don't have to go through the haggling. They don't have to feel like they have to, fight and claw their way
Hmm.
to get what they're worth. And then we do it every quarter. So over a period of 3 or 4 quarters, she was probably still being underpaid, but we were really making a dent against her wanting to go somewhere else because she was like, they're getting really close to what I can make elsewhere. I'm a legend here. They love me. They've given me equity on top of this salary. And the last thing we do, which I would encourage almost every company to consider doing, we also took 1% of our revenues. So 1% went to charity, 1% we paid in commissions to our own team. So when you join Spiff, everybody gets 1% of revenues at Spiff. And
Gotcha.
so, yeah, so that was a really
That's
neat thing
cool.
too. Yeah. And so, some days I remember in December one year, I was like, man, maybe this will amount to something. And I remember getting like a $400 check just for that month. And I was like, wow, this is starting to get real. Like, I mean, this is a car payment, like a really nice car payment,
Yes.
and people are getting checks every month. At a minimum, it was like, hey, you can afford to take your loved one out or your significant other out for dinner 2 or 3 times this month, and Spiff will pay for it. And
That's
so
great. I really love that because it's similar to like tip jar shared with the kitchen in the back. All right, but we like
yes,
it's easy to think that commissions are only for salespeople and the engineers and marketing and customer success is just like they're not in that mindset. It's easy to say that, but it's not the
it
right
is.
thing to
No, I
say that.
agree.
Hmm.
Totally agree with you, Ike. It ended up being a really fun thing. I mean, as we got so big and we raised a lot of venture capital, that it ended up kind of some months getting diluted down a little bit because we had 360 people,
Hmm.
and our revenues were, like we hired ahead of our revenues. And so for a while it dipped, and I'd say it was something like $80 a month or something. But yes, for a lot of companies, I think even for Spiff, it was very meaningful. And for a lot of companies, I think it could be really meaningful. It could be like $1,000 a month. If you're a really profitable services company, why not do that? And it's a
Hmm.
bit like a profit share. It's like, I look at it as like equity, but they're getting the benefits of that every single month. It's like liquid equity, and so I think it has a
Hmm.
really strong retentive uh, potential impact on your company.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Your reputation of that generous leadership and that culture preceded you even before Spiff. And I'll let you know on a secret. I coach a lot of tech CEOs, first time founders now, Jeron. And I happen to know behind the scenes that someone in the engineering section became a good friend of mine at Spiff. He's no longer there. And
Wow.
he raved about the culture and what was
Oh, that's
created.
awesome.
And I said, good on, Jaron. Good, good, good. I was rooting for you.
Yeah, that's
And the
awesome.
fact that all the way down, right, they could feel it. And that is,
Awesome.
in the end, it's always about people. It's always about people.
Always. Yeah.
Always about people. It doesn't matter what the widget is or what the size of the entity or what structure it is. Leadership is about people. Growth is about people. Problems are about people. And you ultimately have to come up with your own way to lead through them and inspire them. And you've done that multiple times.
Well,
It's
thank
been
you.
great to see. Great to see you progress as well.
Thanks,
We
man.
don't have as much time left, so I'm going to ask you some tactical questions that I know people want to hear. The idea of selling a company after it gets to a certain stage, at the start versus later on, uh, Oh, somebody just called me. I just got a call. I got an email. How does that ball start rolling? When do you decide when to look for a buyer? When do you
Got it.
start looking for an exit?
Yeah.
What are some of the things you've learned about what it takes to take an entity from one size to another, and all of a sudden you're the belle of the ball, or
Yeah.
not? How do you do it? Yeah.
Yeah. There is a lot of luck involved. So and I know that's not the thing that we probably want to focus on here as a team, but as a group right now. But I will, that there's the famous quote from Louis Pasteur, which I love so much, which is chance favors the prepared mind. And so
Mhm.
luck favors the prepared, right? And so there is a healthy dose of luck. So, you look at, if you look at, if I were to, so I remember I was with a bunch of, I volunteer sometimes with like a youth group, and I was with a youth group down in Moab, and we were out of cell range, but we were mountain biking hard one day, and we got to the end of the day, and we said, let's just go grab ourselves a Mountain Dew or a drink or something at the convenience store. And so we drove into town, and as I was driving into town, into Moab, Utah, this is a very, for those who are in Utah or might be listening, this is a remote mountain biking mecca, actually, in southern Utah. It's beautiful, but you can quickly get out of cell range down there. Um, and we drove into town, and as soon as we hit cell range, my phone just started vibrating like crazy. It was like zzz, 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 because it was getting all these texts coming in. And I was like, well, it's been like 24 hours since I was within cell coverage. So I was like, that's weird. I looked down, and there's like 16 texts from my co-founder, Matt. And I was like, what? And he's like, call me now. And so I got to the gas station, and I kind of lazily was like, all right, I guess I'll give him a call. It was like 7 o'clock at night. I put the pump in there. It was like on a Saturday too, or something crazy, Friday. And so I put the pump in the thing, and I go, kind of pick up the phone and call him. And he's like, I've been trying to reach you. And I was like, well, sorry, I've been out of cell coverage. And he's like, well, we just got an offer on our company. And he told me the number, and at the time, the number wasn't that great, actually. It was like, okay, I mean, it would be fine for us, but we were kind of like, um, but I share that story because if you were to ask me, literally 5 minutes before I called my co-founder, and we ended up selling that company for right around $20 million. So that was one of our earlier exits, and that kind of set us up with enough money that we didn't. It got a lot easier to raise money, and frankly, we had kind of fu money after that. We could just kind
Yeah.
of do some of what we wanted to do. But if you were to ask me 2 minutes before I called him back that we were going to get an offer on our company, I would have laughed. I would have literally laughed. I would have been like, that's hysterical. That's so funny. And so there is an element of luck. We've all heard the statement that it's better to be bought than to be sold. And I think that's trite, but I think there's an element of truth to that, which is, the best thing you can do as a founder to get to an exit is to make yourself indispensable, and to grow your revenues really, really fast. And that's really heads down. It's a heads down operation. It's not, your head's not on a swivel looking around like, how do I sell my company? Your head's down, and how do I grow my company? So that's probably the most important thing. That said, and here's the nuance. um, I'll share a story about Spiff. So Spiff, in the Series Seed, we raised from a bunch of local funds that I knew really well, and that went great. And the Series A, we raised from a company called Norwest Ventures, a very great venture capital firm out of the Bay Area. I love them. And Sean Jacobson, this is for you. I love you so much. He's an amazing investor, and he bet on me early on, and I owe him a lot. And Sean, so he came in, and one of the first things, Sean's the best networker I've ever met in my entire life. And that's saying a lot because he's a Bay Area VC. So I apologize, Mike, I got my wife walking by here. But so, one of the things that one of the things first things he did was he said, hey, I want to find a, sorry guys, I'm going to move over here so I can hopefully get out of, there's a little bit of background noise in there. he said, one of the first things he did is he said, look, I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of potential connections that I think could be useful for you. And I said, great. Who are you thinking? He said, well, how would you like to meet Salesforce? And I said, oh, I would love to connect with Salesforce. They're kind of in many ways our ideal acquirer. And so he made the intro. We met with Salesforce Ventures. They were very interested. I think they passed on that first Series A round. Series B came around, and we raised from Lightspeed, and they wanted in on that round big time. And we kind of, and Salesforce may watch this, we kind of intentionally held them at bay. We kind of said, we'll see if we have room. And, and so they ended up wanting to get a much bigger piece than they were able to get. So then Series C came around, and again, they wanted more because we'd given them very little in the Series B. And they actually ended up leading our Series C. We ended up getting 3 other term sheets, but we liked theirs the best. And so I give that as a little bit of a counterbalance to the heads down, because if we hadn't had our heads up at least a little bit, and we weren't so stupid to say, hey, this is our best potential acquirer. Let's not be stupid about how we have a relationship here. On the one hand, we didn't give them complete control over Spiff too early, because then that could have eliminated any market pressure for them to want to acquire us. And it frankly also could have killed the competitive dynamic for anyone else that wanted to acquire us. So we were smart about trying to balance that. But on the flip side, we did allow them into the company. So we didn't say, no, we're not going to have a relationship with you at all. We tried to find this nice balance. And I think that's a good metaphor for, the best thing you do is keep your heads down, but certainly you want to make sure you're very thoughtful about potential acquirers and developing a good relationship with them early on as much as you can. So hopefully that helped.
Brilliant answer. Brilliant. And love the stories. You've got a natural gift for being able to tell the stories with the
Thanks,
principles.
Benoy.
Dude, I'm your fan, biggest fan. I've loved your humble, smart, hard work ethic based ability to create these businesses. You've led the way with your actions more than your words, and you're a legend here in Utah.
Yeah.
Hey, I like that. Thank you. Way to use our term.
You
You're the
got
best.
it. It's real. And you're with family time, and I'm being very cautious of the time. It's almost time to wrap up. Ike, do you have any questions for?
No, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I think your wisdom, your experience, and the things you implemented will help a lot of first-time founders, and that's what we're all about here. So thank you for being open and from the heart. We can tell. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate spending time with each of you. And Benoy, thank you so much for giving me the pleasure of hanging out with you again.